Thank you for joining us for today's Sybase webcast on Power Designer, a deep dive into version 16's glossary and portal composer. Without any further delay, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Power Designer Product Marketing Manager, Lori Barker. You now have the floor.
Thank you so much, Otto, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to set the stage today that in August, when we had our Blueprint TechCast focused on what's new with Power Designer 16, the vast number of questions that came in were around the Enterprise Glossary and the Portal Composer. So we wanted to give you a chance to learn more about these exciting features and benefits with today's presentation. You can advance to the next slide, please. With us today, we have Matt Creason, the Principal System Consultant for Architecture here at Sybase. And Matt has worked on the Power Designer team for a number of years and will be doing the deep dive presentation as well as a live demonstration for you. We've gotten a lot of interest, a tremendous number of people that have registered, and quite a few people attending this webcast. So without further ado, let's kick it off with Matt.
Thanks, Lori, and good morning or good afternoon wherever you may be located. So today's topic is really about helping enterprises collaborate, and we're going to talk about the glossary, which contains business terms and definitions to help establish consistency throughout the entire modeling artifact space within Power Designer. And then secondarily will be the Portal Composer. The Portal Composer provides the ability for non-modelers to make edits to certain information directly through the web interface that we brought to the product back in version 15. So with that, let's start with the Power Designer Glossary. The Power Designer Glossary sits kind of in the core of the product. It is a repository-based feature and is only available with the repository. And you can see it sits right there in the middle where you see the nice orange star. The glossary itself has a couple different components. We do provide a new specific glossary browser tab. So at the bottom left-hand screen in my live demo, you'll see it. But if you're running Power Designer 16, with a repository, you'll see now that between local and repository, you'll see a new glossary tab. Within the glossary, you can have a couple different artifacts. One's going to be authorized terms, which you can then group by categories. So kind of a loose taxonomy, if you want to play it that way, of how things are grouped or understood. With each term, we'll talk about the detail that you can provide on a term when we get into the actual demonstration. We have related terms, so you can relate other valid terms to this term. At the same time, you can also provide synonyms, and we'll talk about how related terms and synonyms work differently and how they come about when you use them as part of the governance checking that we provide within the product. Now, we also have global business rules or business rules that you can put within the glossary. We'll briefly talk about that today, but the majority of the interest that we got feedback from on the last webcast was really talking about the data dictionary and the terms and the synonyms and things of that nature. We'll talk about the reports that you can pull out of the glossary, and I'll show you a brief one on how to create it. And we'll talk about the glossary extension. How can you extend the glossary to ensure you're capturing the metadata for your data dictionary or enterprise glossary, and how that happens and how that realizes itself. Then we'll take the glossary that we work with, and then we're going to turn that and bring it into the modeling environment. We're going to use it in our auto-completion opportunity. We can also use it in our name to code if we want to, as well as we have specific check model rules now built around that, which help you understand where are you not using specific glossary terms or synonyms. Then we'll look at the glossary keyword and searching. So we'll look at that within the Power Designer portal when we get to the portal piece of it. We'll talk about how to import and export the glossary, and then we'll look at keyword definitions. Keywords are new items we brought within 16, and they span all objects, not just the glossary, and how those realize themselves when we do searches and things of that nature. So those are the topics of the glossary. What you see on the right-hand side is the browser. That's a picture of the browser, and then below that is the auto-completion working through different terms within the browser as a user would type in the name, in this case, of an entity. The next topic that we're going to talk about and demonstrate is going to be the Power Designer Portal Composer. Now again, this is a web-based interface that we provide with the repository. Both of these, again, are repository-based features that we ship with the product when you buy the repository, and it allows you to view the live repository as it sits today, and then with the Composer piece, now you can also edit it. And within that, to summarize, the Portal Composer really is the ability to edit the comment, the description, and the annotation today on any object within Power Designer. And I'll show you how that works. We'll talk about the versioning and things of that nature. And then the portal itself, because they kind of go hand in hand, we're going to mention a little bit about the portal. We'll talk about some of the new full text search features, the impact analysis, and some of the other additional items, which you'll see the glossary in the portal, as well as now we have the role-based UI. So those are the items of the portal and Portal Composer that we'll be discussing. And real quick, I do have screenshots within the deck that you can print off as a PDF, and they're really for you to refer back to when you take this back to your desk and work through it, because I thought for the most part what we want to do is we want to spend time in the tool. So I'm not going to go through all the different screenshots that I provided on the Portal Composer, because I'm actually going to show that to you in the product and as we work through it. So without further ado, we're actually just going to jump in and start sharing my desktop. Hopefully. There we go. Okay. So now that everybody should hopefully see my desktop, again, as Otto had mentioned, to go full screen, if you hit the F5 key, it will take the desktop full screen, and you shouldn't have to scroll around. So the first thing we want to talk about is the glossary itself. So this is Power Designer 16 for those who haven't seen it. And at the bottom here, in the bottom left-hand side, you see I have local, glossary, and the repository. I am logged into my repository. If I click on the glossary tab, you can see I have a set of glossary terms. And each term has its own specific information in it, in metadata. So if I look at, let's say, party, party has a name and a code just like everything else does in Power Designer. It also has a comment. It has a stereotype, but one thing we did add here is a reference URL. So this is your ability, and I find this being used a lot in my financial services customers as well as my healthcare customers, because let's say that this was the ICD-9 codes, and that was the term we were trying to relate here, was the procedure code. And instead of referencing every code that was available within the term, instead I would just probably use a URL here so that I could link to it and drive to all the defined terms within my organization versus having to define them all within the comment. Though you could do that, but we do know that industry terms like that do change over time, and that may be easier, and that's why, again, we have the reference URL as a part of a common piece of the term definitions. We'll also have the synonyms tab, and now a synonym, as you can see, is just that. It's a synonym of, in this case, the party. Now what you have to remember is a synonym is not a valid term, and it will realize itself differently when we go through the auto-completion and the governance checking within the model artifacts, and I will show you the difference. And so just kind of keep that in mind. And then we have the related terms. Now these are other terms that somehow relate to the concept of a party. And so you can see on the left-hand side over here, right underneath the glossary root, I do have customer already listed, but I also have customer related to the term called party. Okay. And the other thing I have is I have a governance tab. Now this governance tab is something just like you can extend to any other Power Designer object. I've extended the Power Designer glossary for a governance tab. And you can see I've added a data steward field so that I can add the data steward. And so this is just as easy as it's ever been. And so to add an extension, and we talked about that, that's one of the things I would show you today, is we're going to, again, just come down here, click on the Property Sheet menu. We're going to add a new attribute. And the attribute we're going to add is PHI for personal health information. Or we're going to say PCI for personal confidential, because we're not sure what kind of organization we are yet. And we'll go ahead and say next. and then I can choose the tab I want to put this on. Now again, in 16 this is a little different because in 16 I can choose any of the available standard tabs. I can create a new tab like I've done in the past, or I can just use one of the existing. I'm going to use the governance tab and say finish. And so now you can see that I have my PCI flag turned there, and I can turn it on or off for this term. So that's the basic constructs of a term and how we can define it. So now let's go ahead and create a couple. So to create a term, we're going to right-click on the glossary, we're going to say New, and we're going to say Term. We're going to create one called Mailing Address. And say OK. And then we're going to create another one. And we'll just call it Physical Address. Okay. So now I have mailing address and physical address. Now one last term I'm going to create is called the postal code. So now I have 3 new terms. Now what I want to do is I want to relate the postal code to both my physical address and my mailing address. So if I open up the mailing address and I go to related terms, I can either create a new term or I can just add one. And so I'm just going to add an existing. And so I'm just going to scroll down to postal code. And I'll say OK. And then I'll do the same thing for physical address. And now if I go to postal code and I look at its dependencies, you can see that it has a dependency both to the mailing address and the physical address. And so there's a reason why I went to what I'd call the parent or the owning ones that relate these terms to, because you can see that when you relate a term, it kind of takes on a little bit of a parent-child relationship to some degree. Okay. Now what you can also notice is that the glossary I'm working with is actually local. And what happens is every time you log into the repository, by default, we're going to check out the most recent glossary and bring it into your environment. And so you can see the little red check mark up here in the left-hand corner right next to my glossary. And that's telling me that my glossary, I've updated my glossary locally and I have not yet moved that change forward. Well, when I do that, what that means is that, yes, you will probably want to put security on your glossary who has read and write capabilities to your glossary, or especially write capabilities, because typically a glossary is going to cover the entire enterprise and you don't want everybody having access to update it. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what it looks like for a synonym. So we're going to go into physical address. And many times when we talk about the physical address, one of the synonyms people sometimes say is that this is my home address. So that's a synonym of a physical address. And I'll say OK. So basically what we've done is we've created synonyms and related terms to the physical address. And you can see underneath the synonyms folder as I expand it what those synonyms are for that physical address. Now one thing you can do, just like in any other thing within Power Designer, is you can always get a listing of all this information. So what I could do is I could right-click on the glossary. And again, to manipulate the glossary, for the most part, you're going to be right-clicking on the root of the glossary, and that's really where your menu structure is going to be to affect change to your glossary. And so I'm going to go to my list of, and I'm going to go to list of terms. And so now I have a list of all my terms, and you can see that every term actually also has a status. So again, because we're thinking of an enterprise glossary, enterprise data dictionary, we know that there has to be an approval process to move this through. So you can have different statuses of that process. Now these are the ones that come out of the box. And then you can, of course, change these definitions if you want to. But as I move through this list, if I wanted again to see and manipulate it like I would any other object in Power Designer, those extended attributes that I brought forth, there's my data steward and my PCI, and I'll say OK. And I got there by clicking the funnel with the pencil. And so now you can see I have my data steward. And just like anything else, I could go in and say party, or say physical address and mailing address by using Control-Click are the responsibility of Matt Creason. And then on patient, I can say that contains personal confidential information. And then hit the apply button. So what you can also do, if you didn't know this, is you can come in and just like you would do in an Excel spreadsheet, you can say, well, I only care about ones that David Dickman has responsibility for. And so you can filter by column pretty quickly and pretty easily. Instead of having to go through and set specific values, you just use that drop-down box, which is located right here by this. And you have a whole set of different variables that you can choose. Okay. So that's how you could do it, manipulating via a list structure. And instead of doing what I did earlier, which is right-click and creating, what you could do is you could actually come in and you could actually just say add a row, just like you would with anything else, and add a new thing, and we can call this, let's say, state. Okay. So that's how you could do a multiple data entry as well. Now, the next thing people always ask is, okay, Matt, how do I get information? If I don't want to sit here and hand type all these, how do I get that information into Power Designer? One way, again, if you right-click on the glossary, you can see we have multiple ways to import. I can import it from an existing model. I can import from an Excel file. Or if I have another repository, so some of our customers have more than one repository, typically no more than two, but some customers have more than one, and you may want to import from another glossary model. Now, there is one limitation. You can have one glossary model or one glossary per repository only. Okay, so that's really how we would import it. We would import it from one of those three sources, or we could actually just type it in like I've been doing today. So you kind of have a choice of how you want to get started with your glossary. One thing I didn't show you, and I just want to make sure you understand that if I'm in the terms listing and I just want to print a quick listing of all my terms, again, I can set this screen up like I did earlier with the data steward and the PCI column, and I could just come up here and click the export to Excel. It would take this screen, dump it into Excel, whatever values or results that's sitting here based on my filters, or I could just direct print this list of terms. And this feature is not just limited to this screen or the glossary feature. This functions any listing you see within Power Designer. You have that capability. So that's how I kind of do a quick down and dirty listing of all my terms if I really wanted. Or I could go through a full-fledged report. In a full-fledged report, what you're going to do again is right-click on the glossary. You're going to say New, and you're going to click Report. When we go to Report, it's just like all the other reporting mechanisms within Power Designer. This is the full-featured report. And so you may call this your data steward report. So you know, let's do glossary data steward report, and then you would pick a template. Now again, we ship a list or a full, so we'll just do the list template and say OK. And then you'll still get the Power Designer report writer will pop up. Again, the things on the left-hand side, those are the available items in which you can report upon. The things on the right-hand side is that schema in which you'll be reporting upon. So you could come in and you could say, well, I know I don't have any categories, so I'm just going to remove that and drag and drop that out. I don't have any business rules right now, or this is not I really don't care about this for my report. And then from that point, you would have that report, and then you could just come over here and either generate it out as HTML or RTF. It's your choice. And just like in any other Power Designer model, this report is now saved here with all the other reports that you've built for your glossary. And everybody who has access to read your glossary, when they download it, will get the ability to run those reports as well. So that's kind of the basic structure of the report of the glossary and how to get things in there, how to get some things out of it. So how to create new items, what kind of things can I create, and then how do I communicate that information. Now what I want to show you is I want to show you now that I have a glossary defined, how do I use that glossary in my everyday, day-to-day life of modeling. And so that's what we're going to do next. So let me go ahead and close this tab. And I'm going to go ahead and jump to my local tab. Now what I have open is a physical data model. What I'm showing you will actually, this is in any model within Power Designer, you can do this. I just chose a physical data model just because that's what I felt like today. So we're going to go to Tools, and we're going to go to the model options. So what we're doing here is we're going to go turn on the glossary auto completion functionality. And to do that, it's the same place you would go to turn on any other name to code type of completion. And so you can see now we have a new checkbox under naming convention that says enable glossary for auto completion and compliance checking. And when you do that, if this is something you want to set as a default, you would set this as default. And at the same time, you probably want to make sure this is part of your user profile when you go to roll this out corporate-wide. And then, of course, you can always enable name-to-code conversions. And when you do that, if you go to the name-to-code tab, you'll see now as a selection of that conversion table, I can now use the glossary terms. So when you defined your glossary, if you actually said, customer was the name of the term, and cust was its approved approved abbreviation, you could use the glossary terms instead of what most customers use as a typical comma-separated value file like we have in standard names. So again, you have the functionality within Power Designer now to use that data dictionary not only to define terms and their definitions and find out where they're used across in your entire modeling structure within Power Designer in your enterprise, but you can also use it to ensure that you're working off the same sheet of music when it comes to abbreviations and things of that nature for these common items. But for today's demonstration, because we're just going to use the standard names file, and I'll say OK. So now that I have that set, I'm going to create a couple new tables. So I'm going to come over here to the toolbox. I'm just going to drop a couple tables here. And so we're going to start typing the word party here. And as soon as I get to the third character, the way the glossary auto-completion works, as soon as you get to the third character, whether you're typing on the actual graphic or whether you're typing in the properties box, what will happen is you'll see that it will start to do the auto-completion for you. So, if I hit the letter T, now if I hit the letter I, it comes up participant and it drops it away from party. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just choose participant for that table. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the other method in which it works, and we're going to go and look at the table 2's property box real quick. And so when I look at this, let's type in the word client. Now as soon as I get to that third letter in client, what you'll notice is it says party is the preferred term for client. Because if I go back and I look at the glossary term for party, you will see that client is a synonym of party. And so what that is telling me is it's saying you can use client, it's okay, but it is not a preferred term or part of the core data dictionary or enterprise glossary within your organization. So again, that's the difference between a synonym and a related term. A related term would again be a term that is allowed, so to speak, but a synonym will kind of give you this little bit of a warning. And you can also see that by highlighting party, it's giving you the definition or the comment that says these are things or people. So it's giving you the definition that you would actually see if I were to open up the party, these are things or people. That comes across as soon as you set your mouse over party. Okay? So those are things that happen when we talk about auto-completion. Now I did it on a table. This is just as valid if I were to go to the column. hold on real quick. So if I come in and I type in mailing address, you can see that pops up. And because, again, I'm using that standard names file, you can see now ADDR has been abbreviated. So this is a combination of my glossary working together with my previously defined naming standards file. So again, because the glossary is new to the product, we wanted to make sure that we can use those standard namings file for what they're used for, as well as incorporating them or tying them together with the glossary. And this is how that can happen. Now what we'll also do is we'll give it a keyword. So what are some keywords? So keywords are new to Power Designer. Keywords are available on any object within Power Designer. And, you know, one of the keywords may be address. One may be location. And so you can continue to build out a set of these keywords by merely just comma separating them. And I'll say OK. So I've just got those two for right now, and that's really was what I wanted to show you. At the same time, if I right-click on participant and do an impact and lineage analysis, it tells me that the table participant is tied to term participant. So now I'm going table to term. We can also go term to all of its objects. So vice versa, we can go both ways. So let me hit close here. And go to participant and do that same impact and lineage analysis from the glossary perspective. And again, this is the backwards way of going, okay, now what is the term participant related to? And so this is where we get participant related to the table called participant in the physical data model. So that's when we use auto completion. But we also know many of you out there already have models built. And so you still need a way to couple or want to understand how to tie that glossary to existing objects. But maybe since you're not really building them out, there's no reason to turn on that auto completion. So what I can do is, let me find this in my diagram here. So there's my person, and I'm in a conceptual data model and a brand new model. What I can do is I can open up that person, go to my traceability links. I'll turn on no grouping. And I'll go ahead and add a new traceability to this. So just give me a second while this launches. And what I'm going to do is you can see now in my model drop-down I have a glossary listing. And I'm going to tie it to participant. And say OK. So now that I've tied this conceptual model to the glossary, let's go back to the glossary, right-click on participant, do my impact and lineage analysis again from there, and now you can see that it's related, again, it's related to that participant because we used it as part of the auto-completion, and then I built a traceability link to the entity called person in that conceptual data model. And again, you're going to get that same level of traceability that you would always get, which that entity knows it was generated as another entity in the logical model, and so on and so forth. Okay, and of course, just like you can with any other impact analysis, you can always generate a diagram. Let's let that build out for a second. I guess it's bigger than I thought. Okay, so there's the picture of it, and again, if I go back to my local tab, you'll see that there's the picture right there. I'll just move it up in my workspace. So now you can see that there's the impact analysis, there's the data model, and then there's the package which had these two other models in it. Okay, so again, you still get the ability to have the visualization of that cross-model or enterprise-wide type of impact analysis with the glossary. So with that, that kind of concludes the parts of the glossary. Now what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to the web, and we're actually going to walk through the Portal Composer. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and check this glossary in. So when I get to the web, it's there. I'm not going to worry about reviewing changes. I'm just going to take my changes as they sit, because the comparison window here is no different than it is for any other check-in of any other type of model in Power Designer. And so most of you understand that. And if you don't, give us a call. We're more than happy to do a demo just on that feature alone. Okay, I've got my little green dot, which means now my glossary and my locals up there, my glossary and my repository. And so now what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up my browser, and we're going to log into the Power Designer portal. So using my super secret password here and user ID, we're going to log in. Now what you'll see is the interface really hasn't changed too much on the Power Designer portal. We talked about different things that we have, like full text search and things of that nature. To make use of those items, when it comes to the textual search, when we talk about textual search, we're talking about SQL code, we're talking about descriptions, we're talking about annotations, we're talking about comments. To get that stuff to work, we build an index, and it's not a database index, it's an application server index. And so this is something new within the Power Designer portal, which affects both the portal and the portal composer. And under the server settings, you'll see a search button. And you can see the last time I built this was at 10:44 Central Standard Time today. And it's scheduled to rebuild itself at 12:42 here in about 5 minutes. But what we can see is that you can change this index rebuild interval. Mine set to 2 hours. So what that means is that if you're checking in material on a very regular basis every half hour, you've got a lot of people hitting your repository and a lot of people who want to search that repository, I highly recommend that you reduce this index setting and make it just a little bit smaller. Whether it be a half hour or, you can extend it and make it longer. And so, or you can rebuild it on the fly, which is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to rebuild the index. And you'll see it doesn't take very long to do this. And this is all server-based, so it's building this on the application server where the portal is hosted. So now let's go to the search criteria real quick. And some of the new things is the quick search. So let's type in David Dickman. For those that don't know, David Dickman is the product manager for Power Designer, so I like to pick on him a little time. So we're going to go ahead and do a quick search on this. And we can see David is the data steward for the term called patient. So those are things that we can see are available. Now, one thing I forgot to do is that physical data model that we were working with earlier, I forgot to check it in. So real quick, I'm going to check that in. Let's just check it in real quick. And that didn't take very long. Okay. So now that that's checked in, we'll go ahead and go back to search. So you can do, simple searches like that. We could do a search for address. So again, you don't have to go and have any really long, drawn-out process to create a search. Now what you'll see is you can see I have synonyms, I have terms, I have data items, I have entity attributes, I have data, and I have columns. All different types of result sets. And you can see what it found. It parsed home and it found address, so you can kind of see where it's finding it as well. So that's kind of the quick search methodology. If we go back to the Repository Explorer, this is where we talk about the Portal Composer. Now, the Portal Composer is a separate licensable component of Power Designer. And what we can do is if I go and I look at so I have a logical data model sitting here, and let's say that I click on the customer table, or in this case, sorry, customer entity. It's going to take me to the property for that. Now what you'll see is I have a save and a reset button. That means basically what I've done is I've checked out one of my floating licenses for the Portal Composer. It's a floating type license, so you can share it amongst a larger group. And what I can do is I can come in here and I can add a comment. So since this is the customer, we'll give it a comment. Okay, now I could do the same thing for description, and annotation. Now remember, description and annotation are RTF-based fields. So you will, when you go to browse or upload, you're going to actually edit it through a Word interface for now. That will change in the 16.1 time frame, but for now, you're going to edit it in whatever RTF editor you have on your desktop. But now when I hit save, what a lot of data architects and enterprise data architects are concerned about is that when I hit the word save, automatically, how can I roll this back? So right now, if you take a notice, this test logical model is actually at version 7. If I hit the save button, what's actually going to happen, it's going to create version 8. So now I have the ability to roll back. So anytime anybody uses the Portal Composer, by default, it will always create a new version of that object and therefore of that model. So let's go to, and again, I have to kind of scroll around just for screen resolution. When we do this, I have to go to the lowest common denominator, which is a lower resolution. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use the repository portals comparison feature here. And let me just change this a little bit here. And we're going to compare version 7 to version 8. And then I'm going to expand it. Now again, I'm doing this from the repository portal. And you can do this regardless if you have the Portal Composer or not. I'm just trying to show you the differences. So the differences we have, if I click on the test logical, you see there's a little red triangle just like you would have in any other comparison within Power Designer. And let's see what page it's on. Oops. I probably just missed it. Oh, there it is. There we go. So you can see, again, the change is right here in the red, and the reason it was hard for me to find, again, is because of that resolution. Is red here, which means this is not a test environment. That's what was in version 7. And in version 8, we wrote, this is who keeps us in business. So, again, you can see those differences. It does version it. It gives you the capability to reverse, to roll back. And remember, with the Power Designer subscription notification available in the portal, if a SME or subject matter expert changes a definition, you as a data architect can be notified, or an enterprise architect can be notified of that change as it rolls back to you. And then you can go out and make a decision upon that change. Now, last but not least, I want to go over one last search criteria that change that came about. And that's the ability, if I were to go, let's go into the shipment search. One of the new things that we have within the Power Designer portal is the ability to have result columns. And what that means is as you get more definitive in the model types you want to search and in the objects within those models you want to search, you can further refine your results. Because what happens is if you search any model of any type, we have to find the common meta attributes or the common attributes that every single object within that repository may have. And that's the available of the result columns. So since I'm going after a physical data model and I'm actually targeting only tables, if I go to my result columns, I have a lot more flexibility in what I bring back. So you can see I can make basically a report. So if I only care about the implementation name, the comment, maybe I don't care about the description. Maybe I come down and I care whether or not that table is being generated. Okay? And let's move that up in the search criteria. So those are all, you can see, maybe I want to know how many records are in that table. Maybe that's part of the report that I want. So you can kind of see I can bring back a more definitive list than I could have, say, if I had just gone with any meta attribute, any meta model. And so I'll do a search on that, and you can kind of see what this will look like. And so you can see, it brought back these tables. They all are going to be generated. There is no comment on them. They all have no number of records. We haven't put any record values in those attributes. And then you can kind of see that where shipment was found. So we looked for the word shipment, and shipment was found mostly in their names, even though that was not a return criteria that we had. And then, of course, we have, let me go back to my save searches. Anytime you have a save search like you see here, so let's say that the admin for your Power Designer installation has created these searches, the result set will be based upon what you have access to. So I'm an admin. I get to see everything. But when Lori logs in, she may not be an admin, and she may only get to see the business definitions or the business process models because she deals more in the business side of Power Designer, versus where David and I deal more in the physical side of Power Designer. So again, these result sets are all driven by your personal rights and roles. So with that, I'm going to go back to the presentation, and we're going to open it up to Q&A, and I'm going to turn it over to David. And so, David, if you're there, if you want to kind of start with the questions and answers, I'd be more than happy to turn it over to you.
Absolutely, and thank you very much, Matt. Those were excellent demonstrations of some of these capabilities for Power Designer. And we have some excellent questions coming in. I just want to remind folks that we're taking questions from the written Q&A. So if you have any questions you want to submit, certainly feel free to enter them to me now. So one of the questions that we have here is, when a user is doing a glossary term analysis and doing a search or other kind of impact analysis, how does that impact run and impact analysis? And actually, the question here is fairly long, so I'm assimilating it into something that we can digest here. I think the base question here is basically, if there's a lot of different directions that impact analysis can take, how do we manage the differences between what's expected versus what is actually there? Can we use impact analysis as not just this is the impact, but also get a sense of what is the gap and what is the current versus future state on those impact analyses?
So there's two ways to look at that. For those that don't know, impact analysis is a model, in essence. It's a full-fledged peer to any other model. So let's say you run impact analysis today. You can put that in the repository as version 1. When you come back at a later date, you could update or reanalyze that same set of objects you want to do impact analysis on. And then, just like I did a comparison between one version of a model and another, you can also compare, okay, what's changed between 6 months ago and today when I ran that impact analysis. So when you do a glossary term search, basically it's going to go through, as a search criteria, it's going to go through and look for the word that you're searching on in the repository, whether you do it through the client or the portal, and find everywhere that it sits. When you do impact analysis, it's going to find everywhere that it's been used as part of that auto-completion and or any place it's been used as a traceability. In other words, it's been loosely coupled to the glossary. Does that answer that question?
I think it does, Matt.
Okay.
Here's a bit of an easier one. We built our enterprise with conceptual, logical, and physical models. Can we convert elements from them to be a glossary?
So the answer to that is yes. So basically, you pick the model you would like to import from, and then it will bring in the objects you select as part of that import. Now, one thing I did in this, so that answers that question. One of the things I did forget to mention, and I didn't show you, and I apologize, is that if you were to run a check model on what I did, the check model now has custom checks in it that says your object has been defined with a synonym, and it will give you a warning or an error, or your object has not been defined by anything within the glossary. So it starts to give you that governance built into the product so you can ensure that your objects are getting built with those things that are defined in your glossary. Okay.
Excellent. Now the next question here is around what folks need to have to be able to enter glossary terms. So the question is, it seems that all the users must have a client version of Power Designer to enter glossary terms. How do data stewards add terms and govern their definitions? And I'll take the first stab at answering this. The way Power Designer is currently structured, you do need to have Power Designer, a client version, to be able to create the glossary terms. However, through the Portal Composer, data stewards and other stakeholders can collaborate over created terms by being able to modify descriptions and annotations. Matt, do you have anything that you'd want to add to that?
No, you pretty much hit that one.
All right. Now we also have another one asking about future state. When will version 16.1 be available? And, we're in the middle of launching 16.0. And if there's anything that you're looking for that might be coming from a future state product, absolutely let us know by giving us a call and letting us know your specific needs and capabilities. But we're very proud of the 16.0 release and launch and all the great new things that are made available to it. Now the next question is importing glossary terms. What file type is required for that?
When you import a glossary, so let's talk about importing, and typically there's two ways to import, if I remember correctly. There's from an existing model, so it would be a formal model type within Power Designer. So there's specific file format, of course. The second one is going to be Excel. So when we talk about importing from Excel, it either needs to be in a comma separated value file or actually an Excel file. And then the last one is import it from another glossary. So those are the three ways that we actually bring the imports in. So, you know, a recognized Power Designer model type, an Excel or CSV file, and or another repository.
There's actually a nice follow-on question to that carries it one step further. So, Matt, you said it could be a Power Designer model, but this fellow's question is, what can you do about using models built in other modeling tools to build the glossaries from there, to build models in Power Designer and then create your glossaries from there? Can that be done?
So if I have other modeling tools, depending upon that modeling tool, the easiest way to do it is either bring the model into Power Designer. I don't know what model what modeling tool we're talking about, but you could bring it in from another modeling tool within the Power Designer, or somehow get that model out in an Excel format. So most of those modeling tools have a list and report mechanism, and if you can get it out in a listing like a comma separated value, that's typically how I would go about the integration with that into my glossary.
And so, I think you may have already answered this question, but it's still coming from the same vein of logic. Can you create glossary terms from existing objects that are reverse engineered?
Yeah, so when you reverse engineer, you actually bring those things into a formal Power Designer model, which in this case would be a physical data model, and then you can use that physical data model to build your glossary through the import model functionality.
Excellent. And there's one last question here. I think we have time for just one last question. And it's still talking about the different kinds of importing. And so you commented on importing from Excel. But when you import from Excel, can we get additional detail, like, for example, any kind of related terms or any kind of synonyms or additional information, or do we just get the glossary terms when we import from Excel?
That's a good question. So far, I've only done it with the base terms. I haven't tried additional metadata, and maybe that's something I'll do later today and let you know. I'll get back to you.
Sure. So I do know with Excel import, we do have the ability to map to pretty much any of the metadata that's available, including extended metadata. So I'm sure we can extend that. But yeah, let's definitely get that answer out to folks later today. So I think that's all the questions we have time for. I do notice that there are some additional questions here that we haven't got to. Of course, two ways to handle that is to certainly give us a call, and we'll also be taking the question log and giving some written answers as well. So now, Lori, I'd like to hand off to you so you can let folks know what they can do next.
Perfect. Thank you so much, David and Matt. This is the usual thing if you are a regular attendee of our quarterly Blueprint TechCast. The best way for you to understand how Power Designer can help you is to schedule a customized demo. Now, I don't know whether or not I say this so often. I want to make sure that people understand that a customized demo is not a canned demo. You don't give us a list of things that you'd like to see. We go off in our laboratories and build this and then show it to you folks. This is a walkthrough, much like Matthew did in his presentation and demonstration, that it is an actual understanding of what the challenges your organization is facing and how Power Designer can help you. So I really encourage you to do that. You can call 1-800-8-Sybase and press 1 for the sales option and tell them that you'd like to schedule this demo. And if you are outside of North America, contact your local sales office, of which we have a listing on the Sybase.com website. I'm going to put myself out there a little bit and ask you if you would have a list of features, functions, and topics that you would like us to cover in 2012, as this is our last Blueprint TechCast for 2011, send me an email, lbarker@sybase.com. Let me know what it is that you would like us to put on deck next year, and we will work our very hardest to get that to you. As always, please visit the Power Designer pages. We have a page built for each of the architectural environments that we support, both data, information, and enterprise architectures. So go to sybase.com/powerdesigner for that. And we will be sending out to all of our contact lists, you wonderful people that attend these quarterly reviews. We will be sending out our winter edition of the Blueprint newsletter in early December, so go out and look at that. As David mentioned, we will be following up and doing our very best to answer all of the questions that did not get answered by Matt and David over the webcast, and we look forward to seeing you next quarter. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Have a great day.